This novel is the third one of my series of novels, companion volumes I call them, where I write about the territory of the dead. And by that I mean the world of people who die with no apparent next of kin and everyone who looks after them. So they're set in Edinburgh, where I live, and my first novel was all about who gets you to your funeral in that circumstance. And my second novel is all about who chases your money, heir hunters. And this is my third one, and it's all about who cleans up after you. Okay, so I'll read from the prologue to set the scene, and then we'll meet our cleaner, Essie Pound. The bones fell from the ceiling as though from the sky. A tibia, a fibula, the notches of a spine, scattering about her feet like spillikins just waiting for the game to begin. Dust and grit and flakes of ancient paint circled above her, glinting in the air as though she was standing in a universe, somewhere amongst the darkness and the never-ending stars. Then the dust began to settle, a thin coil of grey to add to all the rest. It settled on her arms, clinging to her skin. It settled on her clothes, caught in the weave. It settled on her hair, turning it the colour of an old woman's. It settled on the tips of her shoes. The bones were small things, not much longer than the span of her hand. A scattering of something old, something long since dead and buried, risen to the surface now. She stared at the little nubs, the hollow flutes, at the patch of floor turned into a graveyard about her feet. Then she crouched, reached a hand to touch, knew at once that these were the remains of a child. Portobello, Edinburgh Seaside, 2019. We enter by the backyard, a small space surrounded by a fence rotting from the ground up. Inside, the concrete area is piled with junk. I can see old chair frames, scraps of desiccated carpet underlay, 1,000 bin bags appearing from amongst a thick stand of willow herb. The willow herb is pretty, flowers still blooming, though even I know the season is almost ended now. Daphne goes ahead, disappearing for a moment amongst a craze of thistledown. We follow, a narrow trail hacked out by the police a day or so before. The tall stems have been bent and pushed aside where the police tramped their way in and tramped their way out. I touch my hand to the nearest blossom, pink juice on my thumb. Who called the police? That's what I want to know, when the owner of the property had already waited 2 years for somebody to come. The back porch, when we get to it, is a rickety thing, open to the elements, paint peeling, glass muzzy with cobwebs. Hundreds of seashells have been piled along a narrow shelf. I count the kind: snail, razor, limpet, surfaces chalky after so much exposure to the sun and the rain. On the ground beneath, I spy a pair of rubber boots, split and faded. Also a snake of silk, spotted with mildew, a strange sort of green. I watch as Daphne slides a key from her pocket, tackles the padlock newly fitted to the back door. When it swings open, I wonder why the police have bothered. The entrance is almost blocked by a huge cliff of rubbish, layer upon layer of one old lady's leftovers, long since abandoned to rot. We play scissors, paper, stone to decide who should go in first. I come last, of course. Monica wraps her hand around my fist, grins in triumph. Pavel laughs as he glances from my toes to my hair. I know what he's thinking. I am fat. The entranceway is narrow. Not to mention whatever might be lurking beyond. But I don't really mind. Unlike the others, for whom this is just a job, I am drawn to the darker side of what we might find. First in, robed up, tiger balm beneath the nostrils. Cover your face with your mask and try to breathe through your mouth. That's what I've been taught. It's only 8:45 a.m., but already my skin is sticky as I zip my suit from crotch to chin, pull my hood over damp strands of hair. My heavy limbs chafe against the coverall's flimsy weave. Monica dabs balm on my top lip. I prefer to go in without it, face free to breathe, Essie, breathe. But Daphne gave the order, might be a bad one. And what Daphne wants, Daphne gets. It's the reason we're the best cleaning outfit in the city, sorting the soft underbelly of Edinburgh's overlooked, so that everybody else can go on their gleaming, oblivious way. Pavel props the back door open for me. We stare at the cliff of rubbish rising from floor to ceiling and ceiling to floor, then at the culvert carved out by its side. I take a deep breath, smell tiger balm and salt, also the fragrant scent of willow herb. Then I step over the threshold, into the unknown. So now what I'm going to do is read a section from the past where we revisit the boarding house that Essie has come to clean, and we meet the inhabitant on the last night of her life. Portobello, Edinburgh Seaside, 2017. The day had been warm, a last throw of summer before the Har rolled through. Locals strolled along the promenade, dogs and children weaving between people of all ages taking the air. The day had been busy, ice cream sales and takeaway coffee, teenagers and toddlers playing in the surf. Now, as evening crept in, it was crepes and beer on the promenade, laughter filtering along. Portobello was thriving, a popular place to visit and live. That night, a summer storm gathered on the horizon. Isabella Dawson woke to lightning flickering across the sky. The path on her carpet was suddenly illuminated from bed to window to wardrobe and back. The wardrobe loomed, doors ajar, a whiff of carbolic drifting into the room. Somewhere beyond the sea edge, thunder rumbled. It would be Isabella Dawson's last night, though she didn't know it. One more evening amongst the living, then nothing but the dead. Thieves. That was what had woken her, Isabella thought, as she clutched the feather eiderdown to her chin. Boys who broke the glass in her kitchen window, who slid in the back gate so that they could steal the willow-patterned plates, her microwave, those brown lace-up shoes. Isabella was certain she could hear the boys now, rustling outside her bedroom door, the dog on the landing silent like it had always been silent. She gripped the purple cover, stained black with the grease from her fingertips. She was waiting for her mother to shut the doors and bar the windows, keep everyone safe, but her mother wasn't here anymore. She was in the attic, along with all the rest. And then just one last moment in the boarding house's history. It does actually eventually go back to the 1920s, but I'll read you a little bit from 1971, and we meet Isabella again, but this time she's a younger woman. Portobello, Edinburgh Seaside, 1971. Isabella Dawson stood at the upstairs window of the boarding house and surveyed the scene. The beach was busy, a clutter of buckets and discarded tennis shoes, though it was not as crowded as it used to be. Scotland was on holiday, but the weather was poor, cool temperatures and a persistent breeze. Overhead, planes flew to Mallorca, long stripes of white in an otherwise pale sky. Isabella watched as in the garden a child wearing a red anorak ferreted in one of the flower beds with a stick. The child appeared to be burying something, or digging something up. Isabella couldn't quite tell. She pressed her fingernails into the sill, the thick gloss of its summer coat still scenting the room with cheap, oily dulux. Behind her the coughing began, that persistent hack. She pressed harder, knew her fingernails would leave an indent. 8 small slits. I was here. Bell! From the hall, Isabella heard the slam of the front door, the sudden clatter of shoes on terracotta tiles as their newest tenant returned. Barbara Penny had been to the pawnbroker's in town, a silver apostle spoon in return for the rent. There was a pawn shop on the main street here in Portobello just as good as any other, but Isabella knew that Barbara Penny liked to keep her business private if she could. "You'd better go and put the tea on, or she'll make it herself." Lillian Dawson's voice came from the bed in the corner, weak now and rough about the edges from all the coughing. It would never do to have a guest take over the kitchen. Isabella knew that was what her mother believed, even if Barbara Penny was just a temporary guest, washed up in Portobello while she searched for a place of her own. Isabella tweaked the heavy velvet curtain to get it to hang straight, thought about what she might replace this set with once the room belonged to her. Room 2 had some pretty curtains, roses to go with the paper on the walls. "Will you come down for some tea yourself, Mother?" she asked, glancing again at the girl digging in the soil outside. "In a bit. I'll set a cup for you." Her mother didn't reply as Isabella made for the door, straightening a hairbrush here, a cushion there, before slipping onto the landing. Lillian Dawson didn't leave the bedroom much these days, was a husk of a thing compared to what she'd once been, queen of the boarding house, spinning all the plates. Now Isabella's mother lay on her pillow in the room at the front, skin sunk to the bone as though she might be dead already, lying in her coffin. During the day, Isabella worked while her mother slept, long naps as the business of the boarding house went on around her. But at night, Isabella knew that her mother did not rest, appearing like a ghost to complain about the noise from the attic. Children playing overhead.